It's a non-core banger. Dr. Ross dropping knowledge to the masses. Man, you now tuned in to purpose and practice. Ayy, yeah, purpose and practice. Keep your mental sharp, learn all the tactics. Dr. Ross dropping knowledge to the masses. Man, you now tuned in to purpose and practice. Ayy, yeah, purpose and practice. Podcast game, ayy, he got it mastered. It's non-core. It's a non-core banger. Dr. Ross.
Peace to the community. We are back with another episode of the Purpose and Practice podcast with your host, Dr. Rawls Dill. We're here on a Sunday morning. You know, this is our first Sunday morning broadcast. We're coming at you live and direct, 11:30 a.m. on the East Coast. I wanted to, you know what we're all about here, purpose and practice. We believe in the Sankofa method. We believe Sankofa as a verb, meaning to reach back and bring forward. We are constantly reaching back into our history to bring forward, to understand the places and spaces that we're in and how we're occupying those spaces and places and being efficient users of time and energy and talents. We have been doing educator spotlights lately, and today we're going to be doing another educator spotlight with a great brother that I've had an opportunity to know over the last about 10 years, I think, when we first met. And that is the brother Isiah Jones. I want to before we get into talking and speaking with Isiah, I first want to bring light once again to our sister Breonna Taylor, and I just wanted to put on the screen, silence is violence, and your vote is your voice. The approach that I want to put out there, is getting out and vote. And when I say get out and vote, I'm not only talking about presidential elections. I'm talking about, local. I think, we have to start thinking more local in terms of, who are on our local governing boards, and how we are exercising our voice in terms of electing those folks into those positions and then holding them accountable. So I'm talking about your local school board members. I'm talking about your city council members, your local mayor. Those races are really, really critical. Sometimes I think we lose focus on that community piece, which we'll be talking a lot about today. But the way that we impact and affect change is through that medium, and starting getting some policies changed and things of that nature. And specifically when we're talking about the lives of Black and brown people in being cut short, whether it's due to police brutality, or otherwise, or other systematic ways that our lives are being cut short. With that said, I think it's always good to check in. And I want to check in on the brother Isiah and Isiah Jones, who I have said, I met this brother back, I would say, when I started doing work in Asbury Park, New Jersey, in education. I believe there was a community event. I think Isiah, you were working at the time maybe the Boys and Girls Club. Yep. And and I had reached out because Isiah was looking for folks to do some volunteering or donating and things for an event for the youth. And I reached out to the brother, and he was so receptive. And he was someone, me coming from another community, I was coming from another school district. He really, embraced me and welcomed me to Asbury Park. And I will always be, thankful, for that brother. So, this brother's been doing community work. He's now entered into the realm of education. And I was like, we got to get Isiah on to the spotlight and see what's going on in his world. So, Isiah, how you feeling, fam?
I'm good. Can't complain, man. Strange times we living in, but when I do more of I hone in on my immediate cipher, my family, I'm blessed.
That's great, man. That's great. That's great. What we like to do, Isaiah, if you could just give us, a little background about what you're doing right now, in this current moment, professionally, uh, entrepreneurially, what have you. If you can give the communities just a taste of what you're doing.
Okay, well, I'm entering this. Well, I'm in the midst of my third year in education. I teach high school social studies. So right now, for the first semester, I'm teaching seniors U.S. History 2. Uh, and second semester, which is dope, I'm teaching U.S. History 1, but I'm also teaching civics. So I'm excited
Oh,
about that.
wow.
My first year teaching, I taught elementary school, or middle school, sixth graders. And outside of education, um, I'm still trying to develop the nonprofit I'm a part of called the Necessary Troublemakers. We kind of slowed down because myself and my colleagues who started it, we got our professional lives that we're trying to balance as well as family. So it's been difficult to do all of those at the same time. So
True.
that's pretty much where I'm at right now.
So you got your hands full, man. You teaching those babies, and right now, to be teaching U.S. History 1, U.S. History 2, and then civics. That it's no better to me. There's no better space to be in as a teacher, man.
I love it. I love
Yeah, that's what's up. And the necessary troublemakers.
it.
Um, it's funny because I remember the podcast,
Yes.
and it was, when I think about those, those projects that inspired what I'm doing today, that again was one of those projects, the necessary troublemakers.
Yes.
And I remember tuning in, and this was like, man, what was that, 5, 6 years ago? When y'all
Yes,
start that?
yes. We was doing it to tail end the Obama administration. We were doing
Yeah,
shows right after Mike Brown got killed. So we were,
yeah.
we was kind of early. I mean, it been around, the media had been around for some time, but it didn't expand as popular as it is now.
Yes. And that was one of the reasons why, and I spoke about Sankofa, in reaching back and bringing forward, because that is part of, believe it or not, that podcast is part of my history.
Mm,
Because, it was one of those things that inspired me, that put the idea and spark into my mind of like, yo, I want to start something like that. And then bringing you forward on the show,
mm.
is paying homage to
So,
you. So in the group that created that podcast, and I'm looking forward to when y'all get it back. I understand how times are, and we got to move, but hopefully y'all all get it back going, man, because that was a
yes.
great
Thank
show.
you. Thank you. I was
No
a lot of,
doubt.
I was worried about this whole cancel culture. I live by the code. I'm not going to say anything online that I won't say in person.
Hmm.
But I felt like in order for stuff to pop, as far as content goes, you almost had to be like controversial. And I wasn't into the gimmicks. I wasn't trying to say something for shock value. And sometimes, just the preparation was difficult. Like I wanted to be thorough with our preparation.
Yes.
So it was like, yeah, this is becoming difficult. And we kind of fell back because I was like, I don't want to say something that's going to get me in trouble. It
Hmm.
just was a lot of factors that made me fall back from it.
And that, is I'm happy that you brought that up, because first of all, the production that goes into shows.
Mm,
Many times we see the product of a show, and
mm,
we don't see what's going on behind the scenes, the research that it takes, the fact checking that it takes.
mm.
Like that's heavy lifting, that's heavy work. And like you said, that cancel culture, that is out there. And I think about I think about our leaders who came before us, black and brown people, who, whether they were civil rights leaders, abolitionists, what have you, there was always a tax to speaking the truth. And, that sometimes was a life. That was your life, was the tax that you had to pay for speaking the truth. Livelihood was a tax that you had to you had to pay, to speaking the truth. There are many folks out there, they have jobs, they have professions, they're afraid to voice an opinion because they think that may come back somehow and impact, so you become voiceless in many ways.
That,
It's real, and that's why I always like to pay homage to those who've come before us, because that tax to speak the truth is real.
Yes.
It definitely is real. So before we get too deep, and we may get deep right now, because what I like to do, fam, is I like to go back. We know you hear Isiah Jones right now as the teacher, the educator, father, family man, content creator, doing the work in the community. But if you can take us back to your early years growing up, and what those years were like, and how they shaped and molded you and nurtured you.
Hmm. Wow. Well, I'm from Asbury Park. That's why I made sure I rep this shirt right here. Love Asbury Park. So
No
Asbury
doubt, no doubt.
Park, yeah, I had to be very strategic, even with my background. I knew I would come here. You know what I mean? Black business, the museum in
Yes.
DC, plus the '68 Olympic picture behind me. But coming from Asbury Park, I had such a variety of influences that kind of got me here. And I had the streets influence, the Nation of Gods and Earths was heavy on my development, as well as hip hop, uh, my family dynamic, and those were all the different ingredients that went into this dish that life has created. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So it's so many different things I can pull from, but that's really it. Like I feel like I attribute a lot of different things from a lot of people I was influenced by. You know what I mean? The hustlers, the poor righteous teachers on the block,
Mm, mm.
my teachers that I had in school, and just the culture. You know what I mean?
That
So I created a lot of different philosophies based off of my development. I feel that are unique, that people I feel can relate to if you're from the community I'm from. You know what I mean? And what I'm gonna really say is, I felt like I always was kind of smart. Well, people told me I was smart. I feel like that's calling yourself smart is kind of cocky. And I don't know if I like to identify with that, but I was curious. But
mm,
I felt like sometimes people sacrifice being intelligent for being cool, athletic, funny, or tough, right?
yes,
And I was like,
yes,
you know what? I feel like you don't have to do that. Like I feel like you can have all of those in one person. And I feel like Asbury gave me the cool, the toughness, but also my curiosity gave me the yearning to be intellectually, as smart as possible.
yes,
And seeing people like one of my big homies, Isiah being someone that embodied those, different parts of Asbury Park. That I was like, okay, so I don't got to be corny nerd to be, a professional. I can still love hip hop and dress the way I dress and still, be respected in all aspects of life. So
yes.
I try to be rounded like that.
Yo, you dropped so many jewels there, fam. And
Mhm.
first, I have to admit that, first of all, that almost like anti-intellectualism, like, in terms of, like, you mentioned, you can be athletic, crazy athletic, but still be intelligent. You can have swag. You can, you could dress. You can have style, whatever you want to call it. But still be, an intellectual and still strive for knowledge. And we all know knowledge is infinite.
Yes.
You brought up some of the influences, and I think that those community influences are very, very important, and they come in different forms and fashions. Sometimes we dismiss, certain communities, because they don't, in terms of, when I say we, I don't mean us in our community, but outside communities may dismiss certain voices within communities, in inner cities. Um, and can you talk about that, though? Because I think that accepting, those voices in our community, and learning from those voices and those folks in our community is very important. But I don't think it's always encouraged, by systems, whether it's a school system or so on and so forth. Can you just talk about the importance of, getting these diverse and collective, community figures, and learning from them and what they bring to the table?
Yes. I just feel like you can't be intellectually lazy and just dismiss something because you don't want to look deeper into it. Because I mean, I had people telling me, "Oh, like I grew up in the projects." He was like, "Why you live there?" Like as if I had a choice,
Mhm.
or "Oh, you go to Asbury, so y'all dumb." And that just wasn't the case. Like some of the smartest people I've ever known are from my town, and I
True.
mean, it's just the individual and just their village that to me just makes that person to who they are. And you can't just, again, I pull from even some of the principles in psychology as far as nurture over nature, almost like, right? Like, it's how you are brought up determines how you're going to become in the environment you're from. So, again, and it's also perspective too, because some people can either look at their surroundings and use it as an excuse to mimic that behavior that made that environment like that, or use it as an excuse to propel you beyond that circumstance. So I always use that. Like, I come from a single parent home. My father and I didn't have the best relationship growing up, but I looked at it like that's going to propel me to be a better father, not to, subject my daughter to the same experience that I had. So it's about perspective, and that's literally the glass half empty, the glass half full outlook. So that's one of the driving forces behind my perspective on growing up in Asbury and just the people I've encountered. You know what I mean?
Wow. Thank you, fam. But definitely a shout out to Asbury, the brothers and sisters in Asbury Park. Um, does not always get the recognition that is deserved, man. Believe it or not, I grew up in Asbury Park. I spent a lot of my early years in Asbury Park. I always went to school in Long Branch, but we lived, in Asbury Park.
Okay.
Yeah, man, we lived over on Fourth. I lived over on Fourth and Pine.
Mm.
And then I lived over on the other side of Fort, over by where it used to be Cumberland Farms. I don't know what's there now, but yeah. So we grew up there, So I definitely have always, and when you talked about the intelligence of the folks there, man, I think of Islam. I think, and shout out to Mario Scagnetti. I'm repping one of the shirts today, to salute Asbury Park. And you mentioned CLI, those are brothers that, dynamic, intelligent brothers, and I think that sometimes, we don't do our best part in terms of making sure that we are understanding and preserving those perspectives that are in our neighborhoods, in our communities. So definitely a huge shout out to Asbury Park. And you mentioned like relationships with your dad. And you described it as it may not have always been, the best, but the best part that you took out of it. If you don't mind just speaking a little bit more about, how you manage to take the best part out of, that relationship that may not have been, the relationship you wish for.
You know, one thing that my father and my relationship taught me was it really just taught me to really just stand on principle and just being a man of your word, integrity. My father, he displayed these values in different ways, but some of the things he lacked, it just made me be stronger in my development. And also just realizing that presence matters more than presence. Because when I was younger, I thought, presents, getting a pair of Jordans for Christmas and Easter was everything. Meanwhile, my mother's providing for every queen, and just because I was loving the recognition I was getting from my peers, I put value in that when that wasn't even providing food or the time that I needed. So again, you grow and you understand what matters more. So that made me just really hone in on experiences with my daughter and just being present as much as possible. So again, principles and just standing on integrity, like that's what I got from my father. And but also he has been a person that always spoke like life into me, encouraging and just telling me to never settle. You know what I mean? Like, he has flaws and we came full 180, right? We went the total opposite direction in my adult years because I took the pressure off of him. I said, listen, don't promise me nothing. Let's just have conversations about life, about perspective on how I should deal with things. So I think, just those are the things I took from my relationship with my father, and it has helped me become the man that I am now and still growing to be.
If you don't mind asking, and and I appreciate you being your honesty. If you don't mind answering this, when you said, because I don't know what age you were when you were like, I'm gonna take that pressure off. Like, because you slipped that in, but that's heavy. Like, so I don't
Mm,
know if you were like, if you were younger when you did that, because I have a similar story, but I'm
mm.
interested in hearing like what age you were when you had that thought, or around about age when you had that thought, like, let me take some pressure off, my dad. Like, what age were you, do you think, when you did
I
that?
think I've come to articulate that thought in such a concise way over the past several years, but it's something I've always been leaning towards since I was in college, because he always was promising me stuff like, I'm gonna bring you a car, or I'm gonna get you this. And I feel like he was doing that because he remembered how I used to love getting new sneakers. But that's not what I cared about as I got older. I'm looking like, man, I want to talk about football. I want to talk about
Yeah.
women. I want to talk about
Yes.
I want to talk about how do I should deal with credit, or
Mm,
being disciplined. Just certain things that's
mm,
going to take me further in life. And then as I got and like obviously at 35, like we was having back and forth arguments, and difficult times. And then I was so worried about life being so short that if I hold a grudge and cut him off, then
yeah.
something, God forbid, something happened, and I wouldn't have a chance to mend that relationship. So I just was like, you know what, Dad, listen, you don't gotta promise me nothing. I'm good. Like, I work, I'm able to sustain for myself,
Mm,
I'm independent. Just give me that wisdom, that so I don't make those mistakes. Because I really believe in, the smart people learn from their mistakes, white people learn from the mistakes of others. I want to learn from his
mm,
mistakes.
mm,
And
mm.
so, when I articulate that to him, he just been trying to be more of a man of his word, and also being more self-aware. Like, all right, I know you, because I'll be like, all right, because I don't want to just call him a liar or like whatever. I just be like, uh-huh. He picked up on that. So he be like, all right, I know you think I
Uh,
might do, but I am. I'm gonna show you. I'm looking like, all right, it's like, you don't have to do that, okay? So I think, these past couple of years has allowed me to articulate that in that way.
oh, that right there, that's a whole show, word, because that pressure, I had a similar situation with my dad, man. I was like, you know, Dad, all I want is a little time, and then it got to a space where when I started moving on in my life and creating a family, I wanted more of a history of a man, and I think that's when I was like, I want to go tighten up that relationship with my dad, which was always kind of like, it was scattered, man. There were those good years, and then there was years of us not talking, and when I was going to move on in terms of being having a family, being married, having children, I was like, it was almost like I need to learn some of my history. And I felt like I needed those man talks at that point, So I kind of, that resonated with me, man. And I think that that's not always easy to do, to take that pressure off, and it's not always easy for dads, because and moms, it's the same with parents, period. But I think that that's a gem. That's definitely a gem that you just dropped. Can you
Thank you.
tell, yeah, no doubt, man, can you tell us, how those things, right? You just spoke a lot about some interpersonal relationships between you and your dad. How did those things impact you in terms of, or did they impact you in terms of career choice, in terms of the things that you're doing now? Did you fall into this, like teacher, community activist, or did those experiences influence that?
Some aspects of my father influenced me to get here. Like, my father was really big on Public Enemy back in the day. Of course, I just grew up in the era of hip hop where they had the medallions, the
Mm,
anti-apartheid. Hip hop was heavy back in the late '80s when I was really coming of age. Us, watching School Days and just having
yeah.
that, pro-black influence in my house. But one of the things that got me to education was reading the autobiography of Malcolm X. And
Wow.
it reminded me of when you said Sankofa, meaning to reach
Yes.
back and bring forward. I remember Malcolm X talked about the black bourgeois. He was saying
Yes.
how, they get educated, they go to the hills, and leave the rest people struggling in the ghetto. And I just felt like I didn't want that to be me. And also, I just worried people would look at me differently when I came back from college, thinking, oh, I think I'm better. Because, again, like you said, the anti-intellectual mentality in our communities. And it wasn't even as bad as I thought it would be, but that's how I thought it would be. So I
Hmm.
was like, you know what? I want to show them that, educator doesn't have to be like we always assume them to be. Because I think if students could see themselves in their teacher, that might make them embrace their intellectual side rather than think it's corny. So I wanted to give that back. And also I just wanted to take responsibility for my community too. Like, you know what I mean? We have to take responsibility and try to do something to change this instead of just always complaining. I want to be solutions oriented.
True, true. You mentioned a book, one that definitely changed my life, the autobiography of Malcolm X. And one of the things that you mentioned is coming back from college. Okay, well, let's start. You leave your community, and in your case, you go off to William Patterson, correct?
Yep.
All right. Shout out to Willie P. So
Yes,
you
sir.
go, you go out to William Patterson. You come back to the community, and that is not always easy. And it's funny because in many ways, Malcolm's journey was similar. It was like, now his leaving was a little different. But but it was kind of parallel, and then coming back and being a leader amongst communities that maybe you always weren't a leader in. Because and you come back and it's like, all right, I'm keeping it real, because we have that struggle where it's like, all right, I'm keeping it real, but at the same time, it's like I'm a professional, and then it's like I got my peoples that I always chill with. But they may not always be making the decisions that's going to put me in the best situation. It's like this line that, and I know, and I'm speaking from my own experience. There's this dance that we do. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I had some people earlier on the show, and we were talking about imposter syndrome. We were talking about what is slipping my mind. Jesus, the term is slipping my mind. Oh, survivor's remorse, survivor's guilt, right? Can which basically is like, yo, how did I make it out of this maze? And then there's brothers and sisters who grew up in the same environment who I know deserve to be out of this maze too, and if you could talk to that, man, the difficulty of navigating, those spaces.
Um, my peers, a lot of my peers, some of my best friends growing up are no longer here, or done a lot of time in the system, whether it's state or feds, and honor roll students, or just people that I would like, would stump me if we had debates.
True.
And like you said, I was really scrolling through one of my friends who was murdered a few years ago. I was scrolling through his Instagram yesterday. I wound up scrolling back like years because he passed in 2017. Thinking about something we went through when we were younger, and just feeling like, damn, if he maybe would have saw things differently, maybe he would have took a different approach to life, and could have been like a boss or an educator, because he was always like a scholar and real strong logic. And it just was like you said, I felt guilty sometimes coming home. I thought people would think I changed, and it took maturity to realize, like, no, you are who you are, and they're going to respect that regardless, and I always had that respect. So I don't know, I don't want to ramble too much, but I don't know if that answers your question specifically, but that's kind of how I look at things.
But I think it goes back to originally what we were talking about, and validating our communities, and being a leader within the community and of the community, and being somebody that folks can touch and feel. I think that that's important, but there's sometimes we get education, to go back to your original thought, folks get education for different reasons. Sometimes folks get education to escape, whether it's poverty, whether it's a situation or a lifestyle or community. Others get education to say, all right, how can I bring this knowledge back to the community and impact change within the community? I find that those who do that, who bring that information back, that knowledge back, and uplift the community, no matter what, the community is going to have a genuine love for that brother, for that sister. Um, not saying it's easy, but there is going to be a genuine love. I grew up in Long Branch, went to college, came back to the community, and then came back as a teacher. Okay. And then was as a principal. And it wasn't always easy. It wasn't always easy, but I felt that, uplifting the community was one of my jobs and responsibilities, and getting that education. So, thank you for sharing that, man. You definitely did. And don't be afraid of rambling, because I feel like you got a lot of jewels in you and they need to come out. So, definitely do not hold back, fam. Speaking, and I mentioned the term imposter syndrome, and being in spaces and maybe not believing that you're supposed to be in those spaces, and not having that confidence that, this is where I belong. Can you talk to any experiences that you might have had, whether they be professionally or academically, where you felt that at any time?
With that sometimes now. I work with, it's only a few Black educators at my in my school district, and we just recently picked up an administrator. She's my coach, and I'm real happy to have a coach with such a strong, solid background. So sometimes, like when we in meetings, I forget that I'm just only my third year teaching, and I went the alternate route, right? So
Mhm,
some of the terms and things that they say, I'm looking like, damn, they sharp, and I don't know nothing
mhm.
about that. So I think that again, that I question myself, but then sometimes I'll add something to it that they didn't think about from my experience, and they look at it like, wow, I didn't think about it like that. So yeah, it definitely it takes a lot of self confidence to just remind you, like, yo, I belong to be, I deserve to be here just as much as the next person.
True.
But occasionally, when you aren't able to talk about education from the technical aspect like everyone else has been trained to, that's sometimes why I struggle. Like I feel inadequate. So I'm gonna just play the wall and just listen. And that's where I'm at right now. But again, it's only my third year. So I have to also remind myself that, like, this is my third year. So
Mhm.
maybe I should stop putting so much pressure on myself, just continue to be curious, and also pull on my wife. And my wife is like her 10th year teaching. And
Oh,
she and I
okay.
have conversations about just like this approach, and she helps me out so much. So just pulling on all those different influences and resources, and just having patience with myself. That keep me from feeling like the imposter within my profession.
True. And building that community. And you kind of spoke about that. It sounds like there's a principal there that you're working with closely. Your
Yep,
wife, you mentioned, is an educator, so there you have that. You definitely have me if there's anything that I can
I
ever
appreciate
assist,
that.
or because I think that building community is really, really important.
Mm,
And I think it's something that we lose in education many times,
mm,
especially when we start talking about Black and brown educators.
yeah.
There's not always that community there. So, but I think when we start talking about imposter syndrome, we talked about it professionally, right?
Mm,
Um, and now here you are as a teacher, as an educator, and you're having an opportunity to work with young people, in these brilliant minds that they have, but sometimes they may have doubts.
mm.
Like, if you can talk to, as an educator, you spoke earlier about your father speaking life into you. If you can talk a little bit about your role, forget about the Common Core standards, the New Jersey Student Learning, forget about those things.
Mm.
What are some of the other deliverables that you bring into the classroom to create culture, to create climate, and to help maybe students not fall victim to something like imposter syndrome?
I think giving students multiple ways to interact, especially with this distance learning, right? My school is 100% distance learning, so I do a lot of cold calls. For those that are unfamiliar with that term, is when I just call on a student randomly to contribute, as a way for holding them accountable to make sure that they are engaged in the lesson. But for those that aren't comfortable speaking on a mic, I let them text me or drop a comment in the chat, and then I'll bring it forth to the conversation, and also not flat out saying that you're wrong. I look for something that can push the conversation forward, so I can let them know that you are in the, you like, use the
Mm.
old school reference, like, you're warm, you're warm.
Mhm. Mhm.
So they are close to being correct and finding that, and just letting them know, like, okay, you're in the right direction. Or I added on to them and make them repeat the correct answer so that they can at least leave that conversation knowing what the right answer is, and just, you know, giving everybody a chance, or even warning some of them. Like, I'll text a student, like, I'm about to come to you, I'm going to ask you this. The rest of the class don't know I'm going to ask them this, but they know. So they know to get prepared, and that just builds their confidence up. So when they're correct, they're like, oh, he got my back. He's not trying to play me or embarrass me. And you know, that's some of the ways that I'm able to build their confidence up. And also, just I think I'm real good at analogies and making past events in history relevant to today, or see parallels. So when I do that, you know, I think some of my students pick up on that. Like, we were talking about what is a limited. We're talking about the Great Depression and the New Deal, and I'm asking about the role of government, how it expanded. And you know, I said, what's an example of limited government? You know, a strong federal government. And one of my students, like, limited government is similar to what the fund of police is. I broke down what the fund of police was.
Okay.
And it was like, yeah, like giving all the money in the police budgets, but pulling it from the social services. And I was like, yes, like, I love that. Able to pull my example of modern times and tie it to back then. So, you know, when they able to, you know, maybe put it in more modern terms, a concept from the past, you know, and by me using those examples of how I look at things, like, that really helps them build confidence in themselves and how they see things.
Wow. I loved everything, man. I loved everything from, yo, let me give you a heads up, I'm coming at you next. You know, I love that, you know, because believe it or not, that's showing love. You know, like that's how, you know, that's a teacher showing love. And then what begins to grow is trust. You know, and we know from all, you know, all research that if a student is not, if there's any type of anxiety, or if there's any type of, you know, negative relationship between teacher and between student, that learning is going to suffer. It's going to impede upon. And we know the opposite is true too, is that if we develop strong relationships with students, and there's a trust and a love, that learning is going to come more naturally, because our brain doesn't function when we're in stress mode. It doesn't function correctly. So as a teacher, you just talked about kind of providing, you know, that feeling of belonging, you know, and I'm still holding you accountable, but I'm also coaching you and supporting you at the same time. So I think, I think that is definitely, you know, definitely peace, and definitely needed, you know, in our classrooms. You talked about being able to go back in history and then bring it forward, and understanding how, you know, historical events may still be the same or similar, or parallel. If you could, you know, the state that we're in right now, you know, and I don't know if you've reached this part in terms of civil rights and things like that with your class, but can you talk to some of the ways that you're engaging students in conversations about, you know, racial injustice and racial unrest that we're experiencing in this country right now? Because a lot of teachers they feel they're afraid to have these conversations in classrooms. So can you share some of, you know, the ways that you're doing that?
You know, well, I think now this is something that the woke community on social media might be disappointed in me for. I just don't feel like it's my place sometimes to be subjective. You know, I try to be objective is the way I present the information. I'm gonna teach you how to dig into it, and occasionally my personal opinion might slip out, but I try to check that as much as possible. But I do try to draw parallels. And one of the ways last year when I was teaching U.S. history too, I was teaching about the transition from the civil rights movement to the 70s, because I see a lot of parallels. I see, like, you know, Martin Luther King was assassinated, America burned. Like we went crazy collectively as a Black community. We was tired of our heroes being murdered. And then when Nixon administration came in, he tried to villainize the movement as criminals and call for this law and order. And I see a lot of parallels with the current administration. And I would just always talk about, you know, you gotta be careful, guys. These people, you know, they're masters at marketing. And I love the Malcolm X quote, because Malcolm X just has so many bars. Like, if you're not careful, the media have you loving the people doing the oppressing and hating those being oppressed. I might be saying that wrong, but just teaching the students how to pick up on propaganda. And I always use the HIP model, right? The historical context, intended audience, purpose, and point of view. So if they can pick up on the point of view and the purpose of whoever's the deliverer of a message, they'll be able to see their intentions and the biases that they might have. So that's why I really hone in on those particular skills. So people aren't fooled right now, because everything is playing on emotion and not like, and keeping people from being logical or objective or pulling from different examples to support a claim that they're making. So that's how I teach history. Whatever claim you have, you gotta like show and prove. I always do
yeah, true.
I always pull back to things that you gotta show and prove. You can't just say that. You gotta back that up. And I'm gonna challenge you. I'm gonna make you dig deeper. So that's the way I pull and the way I teach to deal with all this, because we are at a time in history where it's information overload. It's like hard to prioritize all the information that we get and distinguish between what's like just information and what isn't like propaganda.
True.
So, that's why I love what I'm doing right now, teaching.
True. And again, so much, I love that historical context, purpose, and the point of view. I love that. It's something that even with my own kids, I'm trying to get them to understand, because that's a skill. Those are skills that are going to help you just navigate life, period. Things we would say is doing the knowledge, and from there, once you do the knowledge, and then you can act on it. So I definitely get where you're coming from with that. And I also get where you're coming from in terms of like, this is not my time to indoctrinate children.
Yes.
This is not my time to say, this is what Isiah Jones believes. But it's my time to say, all right, you just going to take this on face value, or are you going to dig deep into the research, and that, I think that is the tool, that if there's something that we want to teach, it's like, all right, because then naturally when they start learning about, they grasp this knowledge, they're going to be able to analyze, because now they're going to be able to compare and contrast. Now they're going to be able to say, oh, this is similar, to the civil rights, or, the New Deal. This law and order, march that we're on is very similar to the Nixon administration, and then be able to compose, essays and things on that. That's where, that's where the education and the value of education, is real. So definitely thank you. And I know that, there is like, sometimes people be like, you talked about the woke community, and that they may want you up there like, nah, this is what we do. This is, but there's something to be said for, when we take that approach, are we doing the very same thing that we initially stood against, in terms of, because is that now you, the dominant force in the classroom, now just kind of imposing your will on the young minds, and it's kind of counterproductive, to the movement of intellectualism. So, and we could, there's many that debate that. But I think that it is good that you brought that up, and I thank you for sharing that. So,
and I think I wanted to add something else before we move on. I think it's indirect ways where I can kind of subtly slide in my perspective, and that's when I curate my material for class, because I get a lot of autonomy as far as like hitting on my standards. So I pick and choose my primary sources, or what aspect of the New Deal. So we're about to study the African American experience in the CCC, which is one of the New Deal programs. So I got a source of it from like the NAACP, like their search, like they did like a profile on someone and letters from Black people.
Wow.
Their experience. So that's my way of curating, to make sure that they get like this historical context that's playing to today, and how, while we're skeptical of government programs and the intentions of it because of this. So I'm curating it without telling you how I feel, but you able to pick up on what I'm dropping if you pay close attention.
I love it. I feel you. It's like you designing that soundtrack. It's like you producing an album and like, yo, these are tracks.
I'm A&R in it.
Yeah, no doubt. Uh, yo, can we talk, a little bit about mental health? I don't claim to be an expert on mental health, but I guess what I really want to talk about is, a lot of times in communities, I know communities that I serve, there's been trauma, and young people, they've have been and continuously deal with, uh, trauma and processing trauma. Even the adults in communities are constantly processing trauma. Um, can you talk a little bit about, those traumatic experiences that some of our young folks are dealing with, and then as a teacher, how that impacts the classroom?
And that's, I think this is a benefit to me coming from the community I come from and teaching in the community similar to where I come from. Like, we so accustomed to, the circumstances in the hood that we normalize it. And it's dysfunctional.
Mhm.
It's dysfunctional. And we just, pass it off as normal. And me telling my students based off of my upbringing, like, listen, this is not normal. So let's stop normalizing this. And it's all come to me based off of the things I've read. Like, they had us read over the Summer the Deepest Well. And that
Mhm.
book, I love this book. It's by Dr. Nadine Burks Harris. And it's pretty much talking about how she's like a pediatrician, and she's talking about ACE scores and
Mm.
that whole ACE scores, and her theory is how, depending on the higher your ACE score, how it manifests itself into you having all these chronic illnesses later in life, and or making you susceptible to all these chronic illnesses, and that comes from our environment. And I think it's so important. I love the mental health awakening that we're coming, because the Black community tends to be very superstitious. Like, I always push back on Black people in the hood, always saying, oh, when someone's having an obvious psychotic episode, or somebody slipped them something in their drink.
True.
Like, that
Yeah.
pisses me off. People say
Yeah.
that. Like, that was always the way we describe people who back in the day might have was released from Marlboro because they lost funding.
Mhm.
Or they
Mhm.
something like, no, they need mental health. Like, they need mental health like treatment. So, with kids in my hood, you know what I mean? Like, in the schools I work with, it just, we have to let them identify what's normal, what isn't normal, but also provide resources so they can, you know, deal with their problems. However, and this is what I spoke to you about in the inbox, right? Because sometimes
Mhm.
people that could be manipulative, like they see some people that are very overly sympathetic, and they not exploit that. So I don't gotta
True.
turn in 5 assignments because,
Yes.
you know what I mean, I'm feeling sad, and
Yes.
I gotta give them a pass. Like, instead of like, no, I'll give you
Yes.
time, but you gotta do this. So
Yes.
it's a tough balance with knowing knowing what's considered a legitimate mental health issue, or a stress that they have, and holding them accountable, or just giving them some grace. So that's the hardest part about education right now, because we very sensitive to that. But me philosophically, I'm still struggling with what I should be sympathetic of, and what I
Yes.
should hold them accountable for.
And because, when we don't hold them accountable, we're lowering expectations for them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, all right, but how do I get you the support that you need?
Hmm.
And you said a lot. You talked about these. First of all, you talked about normalizing, whether it's trauma or dysfunction,
Hmm.
in that our community, we have to make sure we're not doing that.
Yeah.
That we got to call out. It's funny because I always, when you said that, normalizing dysfunction, it reminded me of the movie Juice.
Mm.
And when Tupac's character I think he's about to shoot, I forget which character, but the characters are slipping my mind right now. But one of them was like, yo, don't you get enough of this? Like, this ain't it. You know what I'm saying? And it was like, it was kind of like, Tupac's character was becoming normal to kill.
Hmm.
And it was like, yo, this our environment. This how we came, this is us.
Hmm.
And bro was like, nah, bro, this ain't it. So I think calling out that like, nah, this ain't normal. I think that's important. those adverse childhood experiences, you refer to them as ACEs.
Mhm.
Parents, educators out there, I urge you, research those adverse childhood experiences. There are
Yeah.
10 of them.
Yep.
And I'm not gonna, sit here and name through them now, but what they basically come up to say is like, yo, if these situations were going on in your childhood, in your household, or in your community environment, they, believe it or not, are still having an impact on you today. And when not acknowledged and normalized, it only perpetuates and furthers, the impact. If you haven't read it, put it on your list. You may have read it, or you may be familiar with the work, but we have a book club, and we were reading um, the um, the developmental psychology of the Black child by Dr. Amos Wilson. And when you spoke of Nadine Burke's work, I was like, I got to read that. And I've heard of her work, but I'm like, I got to read that deep as well, because it sounds like, the book that Dr. Amos Wilson wrote over 50 years ago is similar to some of the stuff that Dr. Burke is doing, in her work and with the deep as well. So thanks for dropping that jewel.
Mhm.
So as we move on, and we could talk for days, man. I think it's just it's solid hot conversations, man. It's definitely fire, and it's definitely needed. One of the things that I always like to do with our guests is reach back to them and say, listen, if you could reach back to the high school version of Isaiah in this case, what would be some advice that you would give to your high school self?
I would tell myself to stay true to my dreams. I wanted to be a broadcaster, right? Like that was my first dream. I wanted to be like Stuart Scott, rest in peace to Stuart Scott. I wanted to be on Sports Center, and I pursued that indirectly. I remember I did I used to do morning announcements.
Mhm.
I had little catchphrases and everything. I used to be like, "Have a good day," you heard me? Like that was like the early. And then I did radio, so I would just say, "Yo, stay true and just keep pushing." Like it's better to fail trying instead of failing because you think something don't work. And I always told my students, I use the analogy like, don't get stuck in the triple threat position, like a
Mm,
basketball. Like stay out that
mm,
triple threat position. Either you shoot the ball past the rock or dribble. Don't stay there like
true.
so. Shoot the rock, shoot it, and if you miss, at least you get that wisdom from missing rather than that regret from not knowing if you would have made that shot. So that's what I would tell myself. Like, yo, shoot the shots, man. Take them.
Yeah, I like that. I like that, man. That triple threat analogy, because we get stuck. Dr. Martin Luther King called it the paralysis of analysis. Like,
Yes, yes.
saying like, stop staying stuck, philosophizing or theorizing. Like, oh, is this it? Nah, make the move, do the thing. So I think that, those are definitely good words and wise words to live by. I want to open it up, and if there's anything you would like to bring to the table as we close, if there's anything that you would like to say, some closing remarks, we would definitely like to hear those.
One of the things that I want to close with, or just with Black people, I just feel like we get mad at other communities for treating us as a monolith, as if we
Mm,
lack diversity in thought, and we impose that on ourselves. And I feel like if people aren't like, it makes us afraid to express some cognitive dissonance because we're afraid of our blackness will be called into question. And that's, to me, that's like one of the biggest insults to call someone a cool.
mm,
They don't think like the rest of the Black people, and I just get frustrated with that, or will discredit everyone's whole resume over one opinion. And I just think that's so dangerous of us to discredit our leaders who put work in our community for years and years and have done so much based off of one opinion that's unpopular. Um, so I just think we need to show more grace and recognize nuance. Everything is not black and white. It's literally a lot of gray areas, and we need to just take the time to think deeply because people are honing more in on the more controversial takes and going with the emotional, like viral, whoever's like popular with their opinion, you know, we're taking that opinion and making it our own rather than us thinking critically. And that group think is real dangerous. You know, it just frustrates me how all these people who are viral for just sharing opinions but not putting forth any work in. Like you ain't put no work in, but you telling me like all you all is philosophy, all you all is just social media. And these people are becoming too strong in our culture, and it upsets me sometimes. Like I honestly I'm very careful what I put out on my social media. Like, I have some opinions I know will be pissed off if I said it. So I'd be like, you know what, I'm not even gonna argue with my people publicly. That's another thing too. I feel like if we want to talk about this, you know, strengthening our Black community, let's treat each other like family. Like I'm not gonna go against the family in public. Don't be a lot of people trying to be Fredo. You know what I mean? People being like Fredo off of Godfather, and they'll come at somebody publicly. Let's talk about this behind closed doors. And especially if we have the same mission, like if we go to the same destination, just because we take two different routes don't mean your destination is better than mine. Don't take mine, my back. I'm not going to do yours. So let's you know, keep that family energy all the way around.
Yo, that you know, I'm mad that you closing on that, because that like there's so much that, you know, which lets me know we definitely gonna need a second episode, because yo, that part and it that fear is causing people not to speak truth and not to, you know, be so it's so real. That cancel culture, you know, is so real, man. And it's so complex. And it is hushing. But also when you talked about that monolithic approach, like we can't put every Black person in the same bag. You know, I just think about how growing up, you know, it was almost like I was taught, we were taught even in our schooling and education that and through media, that Malcolm X and Martin Luther King were somehow these adversaries that we had to constantly pit against each other, you know. But then when you really get deep into the work, you understand, like you said, yo, there was one common cause, but there were different ways to approach, you know, attacking it, you know. So I think that, you know, that conversation, especially among, you know, our intellects, I think is really, really important conversation to have. Bro, you definitely rep today, man. I'm not surprised. I know one thing, the students that you have are in great hands. You know, and you're only going to grow. You know, when we were talking off air, you were saying, you know, I've only been on this journey for 3 years, and then you change and correct it to profession. And I'm like, nah, bro, it is a journey. Like this education thing is a journey. And we salute you here at Purpose and Practice, and we definitely consider you family. You know, and yes, and we love the energy that you brought here today. And we will be in touch for, you know, we're gonna have to do something a little bit more, maybe on the second episode. But
absolutely, man. Thank you for finding the platform and sharing the platform. Yeah, I really appreciate that.
No doubt. And like I said, you know, if you need anything, any support from a professional standpoint, yo, don't be afraid to reach out. Don't be afraid to reach out to the Purpose and Practice community, to our family. We want to salute the brother Isiah Jones for doing the work that he's doing in the community, in his own community, his greater community. He's doing the work. We salute you. And to all of you out there, as you're preparing for your week, make sure you keep in mind that what you are doing is for the people. It is for yourself, but it is for the people. And make sure that you're creating opportunities for people to prosper and do well. So I wish you all peace. I wish you love, and I wish you happiness. The Purpose and Practice podcast with Dr. Rawls. We are signing out. Peace.
It's a 9-chord banger. Dr. Ross dropping knowledge to the masses. Man, you now tuned in to Purpose and Practice. Purpose and practice. Keep your mental sharp. Learn all the tactics. Dr. Ross dropping knowledge to the masses. Man, you now tuned in to Purpose and Practice. Purpose and Practice. Podcast game. He got it mastered. It's encore. It's an encore banger.